We're in. All right. I'm Mark Harris. Welcome to DiversiTV, the weekly interview show, broadcast from Lane Community College every week. That class is in session. If you're new to DiversiTV, welcome. If you're part of our ever-growing viewership, welcome back. Tonight we have a special guest with a new program. He's actually not new to LCC and not new to DiversiTV, but we'll be introducing him shortly. DiversiTV, in case you are just tuning in, our mission is, and we choose to accept it, is to illuminate everyday diversity issues and give the mic and the camera to those who don't always get it. To that end, then, this season, and our seasons roughly correspond to LCC terms, so we've been going for almost 4 or 5 years. We've been looking at systems and responses to diversity. So over the past few weeks, we've looked at legal perspective from Greg Hazar-Abedian, who's the Executive Director of Public Defender's Office here in Lane County, Marcela Mendoza, who's the Executive Director of the Centro Latino Americano, and this week we have Michael Samano with LIVE, which is Lane's Integration of Vets in Education. Now, generally speaking, when we talk about a particular population, when we were doing food groups, as it were, that is the ethnic diversity food groups, we often do a mini-teach in terms of looking at the issues that a particular group faces. So one of the ways I like to look at that is a construct that I and one of our guests, Remy Caroline, came up with, and that's CRASH. And it's not like the movie. So the acronym is basically C, and let's go to slide again. C, R, A cubed, S, H, and the matrix. So crashing the matrix, that is the matrix of domination. Now, the acronym spelled out, it's classism, racism, addiction, ability, age, sexism, heterosexism. In other words, interlocking systems of oppression. So the way it's conceptualized is that you basically have to look at all these systemic pieces when you're looking at any particular diverse group. So, for example, with ability under addiction, so there's 2 types of addictions, ingestive and process, that are characterized as, that some of them are characterized as disabilities. So some ability issues or disability issues, if you will, are invisible and some are visible. So one of the things that, for example, we find with vets coming back is combat, they have parts missing, right? So there is a whole grieving process that has, when you were whole and able-bodied, now you come back and you have to be reintegrated into a society where that doesn't always make access easy. Then you have invisible disabilities. Most typically, our most updated term for that is post-traumatic stress disorder. We used to call it back in the day shell shock or whatever. So basically, it's in street language, really bad stuff happened to you, you keep having flashbacks of it, reoccurring kind of thing. So in terms of looking at interlocking systems of isms, where isms are individual, structural, societal mentalities. So they're systems of discrimination based on perceivable human differences. So isms set it up so that we often fear that which we don't understand. And one of the issues that comes up with vets, especially with civilians, depending on which era you were, depending on which war you fought in, whether it was a good war, a bad war, the politics of that, military service is questioned. So when we look at the 6 types of isms from the literature, even though this was driven from racism and other more overt forms of discrimination. So you have type 1, which is verbal, physical assault, Type 2, which is nonverbal microaggressions. They don't call you a name, but they ignore you in terms of service. So these are committed by individuals. So organizations and institutions are made up of individuals. So type 3 is where the institution itself, as an organization, is unconscious of how it allows people within it to discriminate against the people that it serves. So you can find that with the VA, which is actually structured to serve veterans, but finds ways to discriminate against them as an institution, as part of a governmental institution. Type 4 is where the discrimination is legal for the institution to discriminate, and the institution is organized around discrimination. That's its purpose, stated purpose, against a particular group. Type 5, conscious institutional illegal. That is, the discrimination is illegal, but the institution carries it out because it's profitable to do so. So then that's a whole other question in terms of how you deal with it effectively. Type 6, socio-structural violence, which is basically produces the largest number of disease and deaths, excess disease and deaths, through normal processes, and people socialize who might not even want to discriminate, but they in fact, as part of their normal job, carry out systems of discrimination. So when we look at crash and the issue of crash, those interlocking systems using difference to reinforce power and control and conferring dominance and privilege, they're essentially divisive, dehumanizing practices. So as an example, in terms of military training, if we were looking at what basic training is and how you're treated in basic training, in any other sector of society, we consider that abuse. People yelling in your face, calling you names, rampant racism, sexism. You know, if my daughters were interested in military service, I would try and talk them out of it because of the potential for them being sexually assaulted by their their fellow service people, and nothing being done about it. Our guest can talk about his experience of racism within the military, how that's tolerated or not. And so all those things are wounds you can accumulate that will be invisible, that you may not necessarily be able to deal with once you're reintegrated to society. So universal practices are the counter in crash to looking at how do you build skill to be able to deal with the systems and the discrimination that you have achieved. So it's strength building in the face of negative. So our guest tonight, Michael Samano, a PhD, who is a faculty here at Lane Community College and a veteran. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. And I guess I'd say that through our collaborations, through our friendship, through my admiration for the work you do, I'm honored to be invited here, but also I feel, that there's this built-in trust or relationship, so I can maybe, go into more detail about certain aspects of my experiences than I would with just the average person, or with the average person who's not also a veteran.
Yeah.
Because of that. Okay. And I guess I would also start off just saying that for anybody who's watching us, that these are my experiences, and I don't speak for anyone else, or just these are the things that I lived through and how I interpreted them. Maybe other people that were there in those situations saw them differently, but I think it's important to get that out there, that each vet needs to speak for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I have to say, in the interest of full disclosure, I mean, yes, we are friends. Yes, we, our colleagues here, allies in the struggle for education and justice, etc. My stepson was considering, may even still consider, the military, and so one of the things, because he had experience in construction, I suggested him, go to the Seabees. Yep. Okay, go to specifically enlist in the Navy go to the Seabees is partially because of your experience. Like, oh, construction, okay, that might be combat related, but maybe not. Maybe that will be safer for him. So let's start off with the questions. Where are you from?
I'm from here. I was born and raised in Eugene, and actually I was reflecting, because of the horrendous wreckage that is our economy. I've just been thinking a lot about when I graduated from high school, which was 1982, and in graduating from high school in 1982 here in Lane County.
The beginning of the timber crash and all that.
Yeah, we were well into it.
Yeah.
The types of typical, quote unquote, typical jobs that maybe someone out of high school would get. It was my friends' parents who were working in those jobs. And so I really felt like the choices were to go to college or to go in the military. And much of my motivation to go in the military had to do with trying to secure funds for going to college.
Yeah.
And
so what branch of the service?
I ended up in the Navy as a fleet sailor. Of course, everyone, I guess, starts asking those questions once you start wrapping your mind around which branch of service. And so originally, my entire intention was leaning towards the Air Force. And so did all the initial processing and, after the recruiters and whatnot, testing locally, then they send you off to Portland and do the processing and the physical and swearing in, and then unless it's different now, but from Portland they would just mail you.
Yes, like GI, of course you're going right now.
Fly you to wherever you're going to do your basic training, and for me that would have been San Antonio, Texas. So
in the Air Force.
Said all my goodbyes and got on the Greyhound bus and went up to Portland, and from there I was Texas bound, and then some of my youthful indiscretions caught up with me in the form of a urinalysis, and all of a sudden they said, well, of course in those type economic times you could be somewhat picky.
Yeah.
And next thing I knew, I was on a bus back to Eugene, kind of wondering, oh great, what now?
Wait, they rejected you because of a hot UA?
Yes.
They give pilots amphetamines.
Oh,
never mind. Okay.
So what, maybe a 2.5-hour bus ride back to Eugene, and the Greyhound bus station was downtown. The recruiting station offices used to be downtown. So I had this time to kind of contemplate, Marine Corps, Army, Navy, and Marine Corps seemed like a much more specialized branch of service, or more intense than I was willing to
the few, the proud, right?
To be.
Yeah.
The Army to me kind of reminded me of my years of camping and hunting and fishing, yet it wouldn't be like that, and it would be more of that than being at home, being warm. And I basically would probably say I knew close to nothing about the Navy, and so it almost was, in some ways, a sense of adventure, a sense of getting away, doing something completely different. It was also an advantage. Ultimately, it became an advantage because I walked into the recruiting office and just said, I'm ready to sign. So, anything that you tell me, you can use complete honesty because you got me. And so I didn't have any of those stereotypical stories where recruiters misrepresent anything. Right. He was completely honest about everything, and we proceeded from there.
So you're a fleet sailor and a CB, as you mentioned before. So what's a CB for those who are not?
It's a construction battalion, and ultimately, I guess a couple stories, and I would hope that people would be flexible with the 19-year-old version of me who decided to go in the Navy, and it didn't cross my mind in one instant that I could possibly be put on a ship And I don't know if there's ever been anybody who's ever joined the Navy who didn't at least consider that they could.
You're going to be on a boat somewhere.
And I don't know.
Fleet sailor.
I had these ideas, I guess, that I was joining the Navy and going to be at some shore command somewhere. And so I was in San Diego and went through basic training, and across the bridge was additional seamanship stuff.
Coronado or whatever.
Well, just right there. In that area. And I remember the day I got my orders, USS Moynister. Well, wait a minute, that's a ship.
Yeah.
Norfolk, Virginia, where's that? So I kind of vaguely thought that it was east. And so, became a fleet sailor, and they sent me actually, speaking of racial issues, at one point the Navy sent me to Mississippi. That's where my schooling was Meridian, Mississippi. And the first night I showed up, they gave us orientation, and they just looked at me and said, here are the places that you can go that are safe, and here are the places that
you shouldn't go.
Yeah.
Even in uniform? Didn't matter, yes.
Don't go there.
Right, don't go there.
And but I became a yeoman, or kind of like a glorified clerk. And then the legal person that we had on our ship was actually discharged because of drugs, and they needed someone to fill that position. So they sent me this is a little bit down the road, but they sent me to the Naval Justice School in Newport, Rhode Island. So I spent the rest of my time in the Navy on the legal side of things, processing people who were, having these hot UAs.
There's some
so it's kind of this,
there.
Full circle type thing. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that when I got out and came back here to go to school, I was in the inactive reserves, and received a phone call from someone who was drilling over on 13th Avenue. And they said, we had heard that there was someone here locally who's been trained in legal, and we need to process a couple people, but we basically don't know how to do it. And would you consider coming in and doing this? And ultimately it was the local CB unit, and so I activated myself, and this ended up being my last year under contract, and drilled with them, and did the weekend thing, and
the weekend warrior,
the 2-week gig, and so that's kind of how that unfolded.
And then you got your honorable discharge. I've seen it on the wall.
Yeah, and actually it was after September 11th that I put it in a frame, my honorable discharge certificate. I put it in a frame and hung it on my wall. And partially it was in response to what I have felt, post 9/11, where anybody who's critical of the military or critical of the government in any way, I just feel like there's more questions around a person's loyalty, and so I took it out of a box and dusted it off and decided to put it up just as a reminder to myself and to others that I take the Constitution very seriously, and have at one point in my life sworn to defend it. So, yeah.
So, all right, you get your discharge, you come back and you complete your education.
Well, I come back and someone calls me a veteran. It's interesting, these labels.
Yeah.
Before I went to basic training, I was part of the delayed entry program. So periodically, I'd be checking in with the recruiters. And at one point, the recruiter and some of us that were in the delayed entry program, you could have your hair long, you could wear whatever you want. And we were walking down the street. I can't even remember where we were, but I know we were downtown, and someone yelled, "Baby killer." Ooh. And it struck me. I'm from Eugene.
Right.
So if you're going to hear those types of things or know those stories about the returning veterans from Vietnam and how they were treated, and it was just so odd to me that here I was, 18 or 19, had not even served in the military, but at that point, someone was deciding to associate me with the military. So
baby killers, yeah.
And so when I first got out, someone referred to me as a veteran. And that really also blew my mind. It didn't even cross, I thought of a veteran as someone from World War II or Korea, someone older, these combat folks.
Waving flags and coming out Vets Day parades and all that stuff.
I didn't think, that, I didn't understand kind of how it breaks down with active duty and, the service. And at the time it was 181 consecutive days. And, but I got out and started using my educational benefits and also kind of what became important in my, I guess, general development as a veteran. Someone just offhand who knew that I had received an injury in the military recommended that I get that documented with the VA.
Okay, service-related
service-related injury. Okay. And so really, and I felt fine. I would probably describe myself now, looking at myself back then, as a fairly functioning veteran. So even though I had physical disabilities, they weren't really manifesting themselves. It wasn't like a missing limb or an eye or something. And then psychologically, I think that I was able to fake it fairly well, or I was able to, function in the classroom, and so the path of, originally just trying to do some paperwork at the VA. The recommendation to me was, look, you might feel fine now, but years down the road, with me it was my shoulder kept popping out. It might get worse, and then you'll want to, have the VA working with you. And there was one of these classic moments when I was at one of the VA hospitals, and it was just me and a doctor. He had access to all my files, and he closed the door and said, now it's just the two of us, and you can confide in me that it really, wasn't a service-connected injury. You were on the beach and you were drunk and you fell over. And versus we were out in the middle of the ocean on patrol when it happened, there were no questions. And and it was at that moment that I thought to myself, here's a person who's looking at me as really someone who's just trying to scam the system. Okay. And it really kind of lit the fire that I was going to pursue this to its end. And that end resulted in me getting a VA disability rating. And so then that kind of adds these layers to, maybe being in the Navy, and within the Navy I was out in the fleet and becoming a veteran, and then a disabled veteran, and just these kind of different, I guess, layers to the different experiences of being a vet. And then it was further down the road, and at this point I wasn't living here. I was in California in graduate school when I finally found myself walking into the vet center in Eureka, California, and wasn't able to kind of get past some nightmares of some things that had happened, and started, because actually I wrote my master's thesis on readjustment issues. And so in my writing about readjustment issues, as part of
psych or what?
It was actually, this is in the early 90s, and much of the research was very heavy in psychology, but I was coming at it from sociology.
Oh, from social, okay.
And it was really, what I was talking about was what you were mentioning, that this idea of basic training, this idea of boot camp, or, that it doesn't matter the age of a person or the era that a person served, and I would argue it doesn't even matter the branch of service, whether you're male or female, that everyone is going to go through some sort of process that's going to take you from being a civilian to being able to function within whatever branch of service you're in.
Right.
So you go through something.
Right.
And then when you discharge, we don't send you through reverse boot camp.
Yes.
We don't send you through civilian boot camp. No. Teach you how to wear civilian clothes and
how to re-enter. No.
And so that, and there, there are different efforts where they might have people go through a little bit of training around employment issues, but really the upfront intensity is not matched at the end, and then people get out, and you could have degrees. Obviously, there would be degrees of adjustment issues or non-issues. So you might really highly functioning people, no issues, no problems. They just enter back into society, and then whatever the other extreme of that would be. Yeah. And so, not really talking with veterans or not really understanding my own personal path, looking back on even my time as a student here at this college when I first got out of the military, I lived in 3 houses simultaneously, where I had complete sets of clothes, shower stuff, toothbrush, and I guess in my mind I thought that was normal. So
why'd you do that?
Because I couldn't sit still. I couldn't, I had to stay mobile.
Right.
And so for 3 years that I was a college student here, you could look at my transcripts, obviously my college career was successful. But, I might stay at a house for 2 or 3 days, and then I'd just disappear, and I'd reappear at one of the other places, and then I would disappear from there and reappear at one of the other places, and I did that for 3 years. And, and that was just how I was functioning with my living situation. I was working, I was going to school, and that had nothing to do with the nightmares and the disrupted sleep.
That was a separate coping mechanism, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a way of looking at it, okay? It's not like you're looking over your shoulder, but you're keeping moving, right? And if you have the income to support it or whatever, it's almost like 3 separate lives. But it's interesting, it could be like, was there some compartmentalization?
Yeah, and I'm really grateful to the people that lived in those 3 separate places, because they weren't empty. There were people, roommates, and people were flexible, and people didn't give me grief, and people let me be who I needed to be. And also, I don't really think I was a danger to myself or to others or whatever. Right. And like I said, I feel like I was a fairly high functioning veteran. Yeah. But I had things that I ultimately needed to.
So that is a trippy thing, right? It's not like you got a girlfriend in each place, but no, it's here you are living as a single roommate in 3 different places in town while going to school, right? Which, as an adaptation, so to get that audience, right? So you can pull it off. But is that mental illness? No, but that is a coping mechanism of and you say it apart from the nightmares. And without getting into that, because it's in therapy, looking at, obviously you were successful in your career. We're studying those reentry issues from a social point of view, and then getting your doctorate in educational leadership. Is that what it is? Yep. So why do veterans need to be integrated in education?
That's a good question.
As an example, just to contextualize it, so because people don't understand, all right? Baby killers notwithstanding, all right? By the time you're a lieutenant colonel, because I know this from knowing a Lieutenant Colonel, Jim Shannon, who wanted to start, Earth Force One, which was a multilateral peacekeeping force with an ecological bent, right? And so he says, by the time you're a Lieutenant Colonel, you have the equivalent of 5 advanced degrees to achieve that rank. So these folks aren't dummies, right? They're, I'm sitting with my counterpart in the middle of the ocean, my Russian counterpart, and we're basically trying to prevent World War III at a level that the diplomats are not doing, right? So veterans are already, if you achieve a high rank, you're already well educated. Why do you need to be integrated in education?
I think it's kind of, if I think about kind of my other primary focus around ethnic studies and, say, students of color, and not to put people in big umbrellas, but there are various issues or mechanisms or barriers or maybe on the student part, a lack of a grasp of what it means to be in college. So maybe something around college culture. So I think just, and especially since we're at a community college where you could have an 18-year-old sit next to a 58-year-old.
Yeah.
So we could have, the, say, 24-year retired whatever sitting next to the person who served maybe 2 years on active duty, sitting next to the woman who's married to someone who's currently overseas, sitting next to, someone who's in the National Guard or the reserves who, just came back from tour number 2, and they're going to be here knowing that probably within a year to 18 months.
Redeploying.
So, when we kind of, even though I tend to refer to them as student veterans, really we're talking about student veterans. We're talking about people that are still under contract, who are still actually doing things versus people that are still under contract, but they're not doing things, like inactive reserves, family members, loved ones, and, seeing kind of, who's getting out, who's coming here. I think that some of what I'm interested in is kind of the degree to which we'll do outreach, and again, kind of thinking about minority communities. So getting past that philosophy of, well, we've built the campus and we're just waiting for people to show up.
Yeah, right.
Versus, no, let's actually
recruit, so to speak.
Reach out and,
yeah.
And then of course we have kind of, conflicting numbers about the numbers of people that actually graduate or fulfill their own educational needs. And so whether we would refer to them as dropout rates or push out rates, or, I'm not sure where we would go with that, but, just these acknowledgements that people have gone through these processes and now they're here.
Yeah. And
so what does that mean? So I guess that's...
Well, part of what it means is, integrating, acknowledging, just like in a parallel way with, for example, someone who is a veteran, if you will, of the criminal justice system. And you're in a high-pressure environment, fighting for survival, in one sense, and you come out to the civilian world, or
you're also in a enclosed, or what Goffman, described as a total institution.
Yeah. And
you're wearing,
a uniform.
You have a very set routine. Yeah. A certain amount of rigidity attached to it. How you look, the mannerisms, development of subcultures, and then you're here.
Yeah.
And
yeah. So oftentimes, while some people may take issue with the ultimate source of the grant money, what is the source of the grant?
The way I understand it, I think it was maybe tied to last Veterans Day, maybe. But there was this announcement from Walmart, and usually when I say that to people, I say Walmart like the Walmart.
Yeah. Right.
Not something else, saying that they were going to be having these grants, and they wanted schools to be
competing for them or getting them.
Student veterans, and so it's a partnership between Walmart and ACE, the American Council on Education, out of Washington D.C. And actually, it's representatives of the American Council on Education. That's who I'm directly in contact with, there were 20 grants throughout the country, and we have one of them.
Okay.
So it's
how much?
It's $200,000 over 2 years.
Okay.
And it's from what I've heard with other grants where there's multiple. I was going to use the term strings attached, but maybe just multiple benchmarks that have to be met. I feel like there's much more flexibility with these grants, that each individual college or university is able to kind of create their own reality, so to speak. And so I like that about the grant, that there are certain things that we're working on here at the campus, but we also have a certain level of autonomy to kind of make it fit for LCC in Eugene, Oregon versus some college somewhere else or university.
All right. So as an example, for 200 grand, so that's, the institution is supporting you already as a faculty member. So some of that is going to be staff money. Some of it's going to be paper clips and the like. So what are the benchmarks? What do they want to? What are they buying with the money?
I'd say the ultimate thing that I latched onto and agreed
benchmarks wise, for example,
to be part of the grant was that after the 2 years, each school that received the grant has to find other sources of money to keep whatever they're doing going.
Right.
So it's not some 2-year PR.
Right.
Gosh, we're doing something great with vets, and then after that it dries up.
Yeah.
And so I really like that ultimate benchmark. For me, some of the efforts are internal, some are external. I'd say internal, we're looking at the cohort model that's already in existence on the campus, where we might take a cohort of veterans and have them taking the same courses at the start of their LCC career, and really, as a way to kind of encourage them and kind of check on this first year experience that is happening with other cohorts of students right now.
Okay.
So it could look like that.
Okay.
It could look like, on my part, some workshops or actual courses around college success type stuff, but specifically around veterans and their issues, or military personnel and their issues, or family members.
Culturally speaking, with veterans as a culture, I mean, to the degree that we can say that exists, and it does exist, do you think those services are best delivered by veterans, or could anybody deliver it that's, at least culturally competent to do that?
It's tough.
Yeah,
I mean, the one component, and I would probably say it's the most important component that I'm not dealing with, is everything that has to do with financial aid, or everything that has to do with educational benefits, I should say, which is Ellen Jones and her office. So it's, the existence of me, or the existence of this new office has to kind of be compartmentalized in such a way that everyone understand that that other office that she oversees is going to stay where it's at, and she's going to keep doing her work, and she's not a veteran. And I would argue that she's been very, very effective in that position. And but like you said, you used competency. She has a high degree of competency, I think, with being around dependents, being around veterans. And having said that, I also feel that there is benefit in having veterans who are able to work with veterans. Just as I don't think that exclusively ethnic studies is delivered by people of color, but I think that there's a certain kind of lived experience or authenticity that can come with that.
Right. I mean, I get that question, doing substance abuse prevention, treatment, et cetera, teaching a class, the question inevitably becomes up, are you an addict, are you an alcoholic? Well, how can you treat addicts and alcoholics, yada, 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 right? The piece, I guess, in terms of looking at, all right, the cohort model, all right, we're going to make sure your first year experience, oriented towards college success, so that your benefits are accessed. But part of the agenda, if you will, the hidden curriculum, to use that terminology, is to do that reverse boot camp piece.
Right.
So to that end, what classes, what are you trying to achieve in terms of like the reintegration issues? Sure, there's personal finance, but then how are you doing, with the psych stuff, and the hidden disability stuff?
Definitely seeing myself as not the last word on multiple given topics. How a course is delivered, as a faculty member, and using the discretion of either, say, textbooks, videos, handouts, guest speakers. I mean, it's just on and on and on. I feel like you can touch on multiple areas. One of the things that I'm very interested in that was already happening before the grant was awarded was having service providers in the community come out here and spend time on a regular scheduled basis, and however it ultimately unfolds, so that students or basically anybody who's interested would know when these people are on campus and be able to meet with them in the privacy of my office or some other space. I don't know. I think that would be really important. That way students might be able to schedule around meeting with these types of people and not having to go off campus and go to different agencies. So whether it's financial planning, whether it's vet center with some sort of counseling, whether it's looking into it, housing or employment issues or whatever, I think that all of those hopefully will come into play.
Because there definitely was a need for that in the general population too. Because it's not like you go to life school, Life 101, and you're taught that stuff, even coming here. People falling into financial aid traps. So, and then also money management and then life management traps.
Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I've had a problem, walking onto a college campus and maybe there's a table set up in a cafeteria where they're signing people up for credit cards.
Yeah.
Where we're not doing the upfront, well, have you received the basic financial education before, we hand you something that's
going to addict you and have you pile, it's not a goal. Your credit limit is not a goal, right? Oh, I can't have bounced my checks because, I still have checks left. What do you mean I've overdrawn my account or whatever? But, there's other things that go along with, veterans returning to civilian life and having a certain amount of free will and choices. Nobody's telling you what to do except you will succeed. That's an order, except that we're not giving you orders because we're not your superior officer.
Well, then we step back in society and all of a sudden we see these high homeless rates.
Yeah.
We see these high suicide rates.
Right.
We see these high, with drugs,
and alcohol, yeah.
And
domestic violence.
Walking around wondering what's up.
Yeah, right.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, because, within my office, the vets that I've seen, so running the gamut, people who probably wouldn't give me the time of day because my appearance normally, right? But then, finding, okay, right, you were in the sandbox, so using terminology from different eras. Look, yes, I protested the Vietnam War. Are you a vet? No, I came within, my number was 35, they were taking 50. My dad's a vet, told me, you're learning French because you're going to Canada, this ain't your war. I told that to a Marine. Oh, you can get all, airy-fairy with politics. Well, no, it's their land. We shouldn't have been there. Ho Chi Minh was our ally. We betrayed, okay, look, you served, you're in the Corps, saw the tats, okay? You're proud of your service, proud you served your country, okay? I'm working in the trenches myself,
Yep.
right? So I'm teaching people how to live. You were taught to kill people. No value judgment on that. That can sometimes be necessary. Not everybody is on, that end of a gun, et cetera, et cetera. That's not about that. It's about protecting the country. At least you believe that. So where that was true, great, okay? But, here you are, you're an MP, and you're a father of 3 kids, and you shot a kid, an Iraqi kid, because he had a plastic gun, because, you can't tell. At a distance, it looked like a plastic gun, and because the week before, y'all had gotten shot with a real gun by a kid. So, shoot to kill, or just like in the Valley of Elah, you're in a convoy, you don't stop for anything, all right? So that affects you, all right? Especially when your nightmare is, you're shooting a kid and it's your kid, and it's recurring. What do you do about that? Who do you talk to? Oh, so you go to the drug counselor. Well, no, it's not a drug problem, except, I am drinking a little heavy, but look, I was in the Marine Corps. That's what we do. Well, okay, a substance abusing culture? Well, okay, sure, we tolerate that because that's a way of letting off steam, but now you're returning to civilian life and your wife and kids are a stranger. How do you deal with that? Does the VA deal with that? I mean, can you, for a long time we weren't talking about PTSD. And so that's a lot of the fears with civilians is, are they going to go off? Go on shooting sprees or something like that. So how does your ethnic identity interface with your identity and politics of being a veteran? Because, you're not, I know you marched in Veterans Day Parade, and you will again, coming up in a few weeks' time, but you haven't joined the American, Legion or Veterans of Foreign Wars or whatever, even though you went around the world and saw it's an adventure, not a job or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's I'm a very pragmatic individual, and I really try to take people as I take people, and I was too young to have really lived through Vietnam. I lived through Vietnam, but I was too young to be processing what was going on, and so I have to take it at people's word or face value that veterans were treated certain ways when they came home. I will accept that, even though I don't remember it or really have memories of it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to think that it didn't happen. And I feel that kind of culturally as a society, we've swung the pendulum more to I need to give you a group hug because you served in the military, or I need to kiss your ass because you served in the military. And I don't really care for either of those approaches. Because the reality is that there have been some knuckleheads in U.S. uniforms to go overseas and put racist graffiti on walls in Baghdad.
Yeah.
This is fact.
Yeah. Jesus killed Muhammad.
It is
those
fact
kind of
that there are people in uniform who have sexually harassed, assaulted, raped women in uniform, assaulted, killed LGBT people in uniform, and just as there are countless reasons why people join the military, whether it's for a true sense of patriotism or money for college or my life sucks and I need to go do something else.
Get it together.
Whatever.
Yeah, right.
And then on active duty, you've got total dirtbags in the military. I processed some of them out of the military. More maybe Audie Murphy rah-rah types, maybe some Gomer Pyle types, maybe indifferent or just mind my business, do my work types, so, kind of this, we're just going to label everybody a hero or do this or do that. That's not my thing. And so when I'm interacting with people that are still in uniform or interacting with people that are veterans, I really just take them one at a time. And, so I'm this director of this project. I'm also, existing in a new physical space on campus. I don't know if we can say where that's at.
Sure.
Building 1. Room 215.
Yeah.
And everybody's welcome. Having said everybody's welcome, if you happen to be a racist bigot, I would appreciate it if you check that at the door.
Yeah.
Because
we serve
U.S.
the same
military
country.
has, been integrated for a while now, and so that's really, and I would kind of ask the same consideration of basically anybody on the campus that, the school or the board of education has said that LCC has certain core values, or we have certain harassment policies, and so really there should be kind of a certain level of professionalism that we would expect on the campus, and I expect that of myself, and I expect that of the people around me. So I guess to answer that question, yes, my life experiences, my professional training, what I do for a living on the faculty side in social science, all informs, how I process this information and see things. And I hope that as people come into that space, they'll be able to look up on the walls and see posters or see brochures that speak to the multiple realities that makes up
what a veteran is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
this is a combo question, and it's good that I suppose that we only have 5 minutes, so or somewhere less than that. Describe veterans culture for us, and what would a culturally competent vet service center look like?
Veterans culture. Sheesh. It's when my father received some advice before I came home for the last time. And the advice was from a neighbor who was a World War II combat veteran who had served in the South Pacific. And he was very close to our family. And his advice to my father was to basically leave me alone when I came home, to not pry, to not ask questions, that if I chose to disclose certain information. And when I first got out, the biggest thing that was bothering me had to do with our ship being out in the middle of the ocean and catching on fire. And so it's kind of trippy to be in a small enclosed space out in the middle of the ocean that happens to be burning. And so
yeah,
as a firefighter, a shipboard firefighter, it was kind of a memory that was hard to, not to shake or to get rid of, because I don't think you can, but really just to live with it and come to terms with it. So to answer, I think that my father one time observed that he saw veterans as really the largest fraternal organization in the country.
Right.
That at any given time you could run into someone and, maybe they served and maybe they're young, or maybe they're, been out for 60 years and, we're over here and over there. And so, I think when I talk to people that were in the Navy, we have certain things in common. I think when sometimes I talk with Marines who maybe spent time around Navy, so there might probably be like these little pockets, and then from there it might expand out. And I'm trying to answer the question, thinking
and
about
you are.
material culture and non-material culture and what kind of makes up veterans.
All that's part of it.
I think a culturally competent vet service center is really a place that validates experiences. So you're not walking in and you're only kind of visually seeing one thing or one version of serving in the military. I mean, for myself, one of the things that constantly irritates me about quote-unquote veterans posters and brochures is it's always showing people in uniform. The reality is that we all wear civilian clothes. So it's always this military-related imagery to get at people who are no longer in the military.
Right.
So, I mean, just today, through some gracious giving on behalf of the Navajo Nation, they mailed me some very beautiful posters that are going to go up in that space. Has to do with code talkers, has to do with just Native veterans in general. And, I hope to have posters or resources that have to do with women vets and have to do with disabled folks and abled folks, and throw down some substance abuse. Where's the don't ask, don't tell folks? Where's the peace veterans? I mean, to me, it's really just validating what makes us veterans.
Great deal of diversity within veteran culture, even. Yeah.
And I
the
think
whole
not
gamut of
usually,
everything.
Acknowledged in a comprehensive way.
So, y'all who called out the baby killers, you need to get beyond that. Okay, these are human beings that went through certain experiences, and they served our country so that you could say that. And I'm not being flag waving about that, because a lot of them sacrificed a great deal of their spirit and their soul. And
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I did serve. I didn't swear allegiance to the country or to the flag. It was to the Constitution, so that someone would have the freedom to put on their hood and burn a cross in front of my lawn. Which I'm not asking people to do that, but yes. So you can. It's okay. You can be a veteran, and you can have a problem with, say, peace protesters. But also, by the way, they have their rights to exercise their opinions.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming.
It was great.
It was great. And Michael can be contacted at live at 463-5796. What was it? They should flash the graphic in any case. If you like what you've seen, email us at live class, DiversiTV. Put DiversiTV in the subject matter. Tell us what you liked. Tell a friend. And also suggest future guests that you'd like to see on the show as well. Because we're always looking for new talent as well as new areas to explore. So, till then, go well, stay well.